Boom. Hello. We are live. How is everybody doing? Yeah, everybody good? Okay. Well, let us... Hello, people. Beautiful people. Nice to see you all. Is the audio coming through all right? Can you see me? Can you hear me? All right. Wonderful, wonderful. So I am currently at an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, hence the decor. How do you like it? Huh? Some cow stuff going on. Good times. All right. So we are here to talk about homepages, B2B SaaS homepages. B2B SaaS homepage, still the most important part of a website. Most visited when a new prospect comes to your site. That's where they're going to check out what you're about. This is our chance to make our case. And today's workshop is all about that. Let's do some housekeeping as well. So chat is great for chatting. But if you want to ask a question from the presenter, Dustin, that's going to come to the stage any minute, use the questions tab, not the chat, because in the chat it might get lost. So if you have a question, then post it in the questions tab, and everybody can also upvote questions if there's something that you want me to ask Dustin later. All right. So without further ado, Dustin, please join me on the stage. Dustin is a research strategist here at Wynter. And what Dustin does is he works with Wynter customers to basically pimp their messaging, get their conversion rates up, all that stuff. So Dustin sees a lot of data. How you doing, Dustin?
Good. You?
Kicking ass, man. Do you have a dog?
Nice. Yeah, bad timing. He's normally really quiet right now, but something outside. So
no worries. We can live with it. All right. Well, then you share your screen. I'm gonna hop off the stage. I'll be monitoring from the other side, and let's take it away.
All right, cool. Sounds good. I'll get my screen up for everybody. Cool. So I presume everybody can see the screen. In general, it looks like from my end that it's all good here. So welcome everybody to this Wynter workshop on increasing conversion rates by improving your homepage messaging. I'm actually going to do a means of an introduction in an unusual format. I'm actually going to showcase a real email that I sent Pep in 2014. At the time, I had started taking his conversion course. I was at a pivot point in my career of what I was going to do, and I was finding a ton of value in the course that I was taking. One of the reasons that I'm also showing this is this note here of how I secured my first paying client before we had actually finished the course. So boom, great success for the course, got my first client. That first client was a website called learnvisualstudio.net, a man named Bob Tabor, who was very also instrumental in my career. And Bob had a great flair for allowing me to make a lot of rookie mistakes, essentially, with CRO originally. I had been a designer before that, and so a lot of the things that I did were things that were not really moving the needle. I wasn't really focusing on the right problems. I was coming at things a lot from a design perspective and a design lens overall. And we didn't really get anywhere until I started taking a look at the messaging. At the time, this was the main value prop that was on the website that I hadn't really touched at all. And so what Bob did was he sold subscriptions to his websites where he sold training videos on .NET overall. And when I first actually started simplifying this language was the first time that I actually started moving the needle. It wasn't, we didn't flip the business. It wasn't the best thing in the world, but it was actually the first time that we had a strong signal that we were actually improving things and that this was a thread to continue to pull on. And so it was a bit of an eye opener for me because it was really about the messaging. That's the first time that we started actually doing something. So from that point, we actually brought in an actual copywriter I'm not a copywriter and be able to continue to improve on this. And we rewrote the value props a few times. We did other things on other portions of the website and other portions of the homepage as well. This was a big reorientation for me because, like I said, I was a design nerd at heart. That's what I had historically done in my career. But all of my first wins actually came from messaging. So I had to reorientate myself into how I was actually going to be driving conversions and what the value of design really was. And so that was one of the big first learnings of my career that I think is still important to understand when we create the messaging on our websites, because the role that design plays is still hugely important for delivering the message, right? The words that are on the page are the thing that will help drive conversion, but design, they have to be best buddies, right? The first thing that design really does is helps establish trust in general. Like, these are two pizza places that are near my house. I like both of these for different reasons. But if I was visiting my house and looking for a pizza place, realistically, the Ian's Pizza is likely the one I'm going to take more likelihood to actually purchase pizza from. The first one doesn't really kind of help establish very much trust for myself, right? Outside of the pizza landscape, if we were to bring this to, our space, which one of these are you likely to actually start trusting your customers to intercom with, right? If intercom looked the way the first pizza place did, you're probably not going to consider actually installing their chat or using any sort of support tools from them, right? So successful design is really important for establishing that trust right away. That when we hear about how you have like that long before people to really decide whether to interact with your site, that's all design's job. That's really not the messaging's job. They haven't had a chance to really do that. But from that point is when design really has to support the message, right? So you need design and messaging to really work in conjunction, realizing that messaging is the real star of the show. And, the design has to really kind of support that. So it was really important for me to start understanding that. The other things that we were able to create success for here that I didn't really understand at the time, and I understand better now, one was simplification, right? So we really had started to simplify the language. I think I understood that in some capacity, but it wasn't so much understood about why, right? If anybody's ever read Brian Kramer, is a book about like human to human, and the point here is basically there's no B2C, there's no B2B, there's only human to human. In some capacity, that's really true, although there are some differences clearly between B2B and B2C, right? The buying motivations are different. How you're going to go through the process is different. The length of the conversion is different. So there are clearly differences between the two. But I think the point is that when we market B2B, we tend to think that it's okay to make things more complex because there's so much technicality sometimes into what we're offering, or there's really very specific things that we're doing. I'm seeing a comment about the ugly pizza place being good. It is. But the more that we can simplify things, the better, right? And so this is still a truism that we're going to continually face, and we'll talk about some more today, is you need to be able to simplify. It doesn't matter that if we're in a B2B space, we are still selling to humans, even if the motivations that bring them there and the way they buy is different than like a B2C component, right? In retrospect, also then looking back on this, part of that simplicity message was the reading level, right? So this was something I didn't really understand at all at the time, but now I'm a very big proponent of it. Anybody who has been in any call with me previous has probably more likely heard me taking a look at this. So the first value prop that was on here came in at a grade level 13 reading, which is really high and really complex. It creates a lot of mental work for people to actually go through your messaging, and thus they're probably going to ignore it. When I started moving the needle, we had moved it down to a grade level of 10. And when we brought in a copywriter, we'd gotten it down to an 8. So we weren't actually focusing on this at the time at all. It wasn't anything that I actually routinely did at this time. But it's interesting to also, in retrospect, look back and see that part of the reason we were generating success was because we were able to simplify the language. Realistically, the majority of people are most comfortable reading at a grade level of 6. This is actually, in my experience, really, really hard to do for B2B, but you want to still strive for it as much as possible. Oftentimes with B2B, we end up having to sometimes use really long words and so forth that make the reading more complicated. So sometimes it's really hard to get even more than like 8th grade a lot of times, but it is possible. I've seen it done, and the more that you can do this, the better. I use an app called Hemingway app for this. It's free to use. I really encourage you to take your messaging, put it in there, see what it comes in at, and see how you can make it simpler. It's going to increase the value of your messaging tremendously just by doing this alone. The other things in retrospect that I didn't realize that we were doing well at the time, where one, some of these wins were coming because we made the value props really direct to what the customers wanted, right? They wanted to get a job. The prior messaging did talk about getting a job, but also really kind of talked about like continuing education, essentially, and like a long career path, which while the site could do that, that wasn't what people really were coming to buy for. And so we needed to speak directly to like, hey, you're going to be able to get your first developer job. So doing that actually really helped start moving the needle. We also, brought Bob front and center instead of the, relaxed dude, stock photo guy doing nothing. People loved Bob. They loved his approach. They loved the way he presented. They loved the way he broke down lessons. So we needed to bring that front and center. In retrospect, I probably wouldn't have put a terribly super long video there, but still the motivation was correct. And then we were able to take things that we found that were concerns people had about why they joined, and we turned them into differentiators for the site about why you would actually want to join the site, right? So I didn't, again, understand any of these things at the time, but in retrospect and putting this together, it's very interesting to see that a lot of these things, where these wins really came from. So where they came from was audience research. At the time, we did, post-conversion surveys. We did some customer surveys. We did a little hot jar pop up on the site when those collected more than just swear words at you, right? And all of those things combined gave us the meat that we really were able to turn into these actual wins to know what people wanted and what we needed to be saying. From that point, I turned it into a B2B marketer quite by accident because I took an interview that somebody asked if I did B2B marketing, and I said yes. I didn't know what that meant at the time, and it was not the path I probably should have initially gone on because I was trying to be a CRO person, but all of a sudden A/B testing was basically a no-go in my experience. Most B2B sites just don't have the volume for A/B testing, maybe on their homepage, but most of them just can't even actually support that. In general, I started copying the mistakes of others because I didn't know what I was doing, and heck, I didn't even know what a demo request was at the time. But I had audience research as a skill set I knew to fall back on. And that was something that I continued to be able to drive value for clients with over and over again. So eventually I learned from these mistakes in general, and I started niching down into SaaS, and I really started specializing in qualitative research. It was the thing that I liked to do the most. This eventually helps me close the loop and join Wynter here as the research strategist. At this point, I've been seeing Wynter results for, I don't know, a year and a half, probably. I read hundreds and hundreds of test results. Before I even officially joined Wynter and I was seeing some test results, I was finding so much tremendous value in what people were saying that I was taking back to my own clients. And I've learned a ton by continually reading things that people say from various websites to various ICPs, various solutions, various pain points. But there's a lot of the same things that continue to come up over and over again. And we see that, and we've learned a lot about that here internally at Wynter. So what we've started to put together is viewing your homepage through like messaging layers, right? And so this is what we'll kind of start breaking apart a little bit more through this workshop today. But this is how I would really start viewing the order of priority of your homepage. You really need to take a look first and foremost at your clarity. It's like the most important thing that in general for any sort of a conversion, whether it's B2B or not, there needs to be clarity. But it's the first question that people are going to start addressing in their head, right? They want to know what it is that you offer. What are you? And am I in the right space, right? So the sooner you can start addressing clarity, the better. It needs to start instantaneously, really. I view relevance as almost like clarity and relevance are like 1A and 1B in my view, right? Clarity has more prominence, but relevance is right there. You need to let people know that this is for them, right? That you can solve their problems. When they're coming to evaluate your solution, they're trying to address a need for themselves. They've got a problem. And we all are pretty lazy. We don't really want to be taking the time to go through a bunch of websites and figure out which is the right solution and so forth. So the quicker you can give them the signals that they're in the right place, that you're solving the problem they're trying to solve, the better off you are. So those two really can go hand in hand. If you nail some clarity, you nail the relevance, then you're going to start being able to create value. The value is also motivation, right? How badly do I actually want this? How big of a pain is this? How much do I believe that you can actually solve this for me? How much do I believe you can make my life better as well? So that's the next layer that we need to hit. This is one differentiation is one for me at Wynter that I wouldn't have thought was such a big deal on the homepage, but I've seen it again in a ton of tests that once people now they understand what you are and they know, so that you address the clarity, you've addressed the relevance, that's when questions start coming up as in terms of like, okay, I get it now, but how are you different than the other thing that I'm comparing you against? And this is a big question because realistically, most of us within the software space, our competitors probably do very similar things to us than we do, right? Probably have most of the same feature sets and so forth. But if I'm in a consideration movement and I'm going to probably be evaluating you against 2 or 3, maybe 4 other people, right? If you're all telling me you do the same thing, how can I easily remember what's different about you? What is that hook that you can place in my mind from the homepage to say, like, this is why our solution is different than all of the other ones you're looking at, right? Make it simple, make sure that they can understand it and walk away with that as well, right? You're nailing all of these things, that's where you're going to be able to start driving to conversion or getting yourself into that small consideration set, depending on how your buyer motion actually goes there. Interestingly enough, when I go back to this screen, so many of these things actually are the same thing, right? We were increasing clarity and relevance, right, and differentiation. So it was the same things that I was struggling with 8 years ago. The same things I didn't know I was solving 8 years ago are the same things that we're actually solving for today. And you're probably going to be solving them for tomorrow as well. And you are definitely facing these problems right now. So with that said, I'm going to dive into some of the biggest opportunities that I believe you probably can start tackling, places that you're probably struggling right now based on the myriad of Wynter tests that I reviewed. My guess is many people here are going to be struggling with some of these components and could start tackling them right away. So the first one is your value prop, right? There's a handshake moment of somebody coming into your website. For people who haven't utilized Wynter before, one of the things that we have is like a clarity score. So people can actually say on a scale range of how much they actually understand what your initial value prop or any other section you're reviewing, how clear is it, right? And I've highlighted here a bunch that got mediocre scores, which is by and large the average. Over and over again, we'll see in Wynter results that people just sort of like kind of get it, right? It's really hard actually to make people really get it from the get-go on your initial value prop. Over and over again, mediocre, mediocre, mediocre. So this is so important that we started getting this right as quick as possible, but it is so hard to do, right? So what are some ways that we can start nailing that a little bit better? First, you need to understand, like I said, it starts instantly. So you need to start addressing the what is it right away. Don't waste this opportunity. Software that helps you simplify your business. We've got hundreds of people in here today. Almost everybody could say that their solution helps simplify business, right? I mean, if you're making a software solution in some capacity, you're going to be simplifying somebody's business. So this tells me nothing about who this company actually helps, right? Or what they actually do, right? This is on the same website, but a little bit further down. There's still a lot of clarity issues here, realistically, but this actually helps me understand a little bit better if this had been the value prop, right? Use less apps, get more done. Okay, I still don't really understand what that means, what types of apps, where are they going to go? Are you consolidated them? But at least I understand that you're trying to make me more productive, that you're going to try and reduce some of the noise in my day-to-day. So I have a little bit of an understanding, but not enough. And this is where some of that meh result basically comes from in the clarity scores, right? Like I have some signals, I sort of understand this, but I'm left to suppose a lot of things. You're not really telling me what it is, right? Like I said before, clarity and relevance are kind of 1A and 1B. So relevance sometimes can help create clarity. So this is a really great example here of a really relevance-focused value prop. I know right away, everybody here in this call knows now whether this solution, you don't know what it is, but you know whether it's for you or not just by the financial platform built for e-commerce, right? I know, okay, am I e-commerce solution or not? Yes or no, right? Do I need a financial platform? Yes or no? Financial platform isn't really clear. There's a lot of different things I can interpret what a financial platform is, right? But I also know if I'm trying to find a shopping or shipping solution for my e-commerce business, I also know this isn't the right place. So this is attacking relevance really heavily. It provides some clarity because the relevance is so strong, but at least I quickly know whether I should continue to evaluate this site, whether this site has my potential solution or not, right? So relevance can help support clarity because they go pretty hand in hand. In my view, this is an example of something that works really, really well. So this is a value prop that's kind of checking all of the boxes, while at the same time it creates value because it's connecting to a pain that this ICP, I presume, feels. I'm not the ICP, so I can't really say whether this is true, but I at least see that they're trying to solve for that, right? So I can understand from this that, this is somebody for people who are hiring people, right? This is, I know that already. I know that you're going to try and reduce my fear of hiring incompetent people, right? Maybe I'm presuming here the fear is that you hire people who look good on paper, did great on an interview, but they can't actually perform the job, and that looks poorly on me, and it's bad for the business, right? So you're speaking to a fear and a struggle that I'm potentially having, and how you're going to make my life better from that. So right away, from just this value prop alone, I've got clarity of what you're offering me. I've got relevance to know whether it's for me or not. And I'm motivated to actually solve this because you're speaking to pains that I potentially actually have, right? Ideally, some testing and stuff has gone into this to support that this is what they should be messaging against. But presuming that's true, this is super, super strong, right? And if you can make your ICP or the people reading your page actually feel, elicit emotion, that's a win in general, because primarily decisions start getting made emotionally first, even if it's subconscious. So being able to tackle this and attach emotion from the beginning will create value that you will continue to build upon over and over again. A couple other little points here. Really, really, really value clarity over creativity. I see this too often, is where people use value prop lines here that really sound clever, look cool, but don't tell me anything, right? So creativity, this is not the space for creativity. You can save this for your taglines. You can save this maybe for some ads, but this should not be the value prop. This should not be the handshake when somebody comes into your website and they're trying to understand what you're offering them, because I don't know anything that you're really offering me from this at all. Be as specific as you possibly can. This is a kind of maybe an extreme example, but there's a lot of things that it is doing for providing some of that additional relevance and clarity, right? I know, that it's an event platform for events, and it's built for enterprise and so forth, right? There's a lot of very specific details here. You could probably definitely still simplify this some, but there's a lot going on. One cautionary note as well that I would say on the enterprise language here, I see people use this and who sometimes want to like trigger that, like, hey, like I can show you that I'm for enterprise, but I also work for everybody else. If you work with a variety of company sizes, not specifically enterprise, you want to be careful about flagging this out in the value prop, because people who aren't enterprise are going to take from this that you're just too expensive and that they're priced out of even considering you. So be very careful if that's really not where you play. If you do play specifically in enterprise, then have at it. So when you nail this, you're going to continually address the clarity and relevance throughout the rest of the page. There's only so much that we can actually say in the hero section, right? We can do a mad job. We can do a great job. If you can at least do a mad job, you might still get people to continue to go through your page and start addressing these questions. But you will continually deal with it. The question will be, if you really, really nail it, then they start asking much more specific questions. They want much more detailed type of answers past the hero section. If you've only sort of nailed it, they still want to continually understand what it is that you actually do. So my personal belief is that your biggest opportunity for improvement here is still in the first 50% of your page. One thing I've definitely noticed on tons of Wynter tests, it is you're well past the 50% mark before people start saying, oh, now I get it. Like, now I understand what you're doing. Finally, I understand this. I wish I had seen this earlier. I wish I understood this earlier, right? And these are people that are, going through a test. These are not people who are more organically, going through your solution and through your homepage and trying to understand what you are. So if people that, are testing are feeling this, then definitely people who are evaluating your site are feeling that, and they're maybe actually never getting to this portion, right? We definitely all know that 50% by 50% of the page, we've lost a substantial portion of the audience on our homepage. So we need to be addressing this as quickly as we can. It's way too late if you're on the lower half of your page before people are like, oh, okay, I get it. Now I get it, right? So how do we do that in general? One, ruthlessly edit, in my opinion, right? It's not uncommon to see sections like this right after the hero section. I would really be testing if this is actually useful, right? Past this section is typically where you start putting information that people start being like, oh, I get it. Now this makes sense to me, right? Do you really need this? Is it creating value, or is it creating an obstacle for people before they actually can start understanding what the value of your solution is? When you're speaking in these sections, make sure you're speaking to your ICP's pains, right? This goes back to the other value prop that we had. Again, I don't know for sure, but I can see here that where there's likely been some sort of research that is eliciting what are the pains, what is the language, right? Do I feel overwhelmed? What are the problems? Oh, I need data scientists, and it's a long implementation cycle and so forth, right? Speak to these pains that your audience might be having so they can relate to this and again, continually create that value and showcasing that you understand their problems, you have the solutions. One little tip here, if you haven't seen this yet before, if you want to really dive into how you can do this better, we had another Wynter workshop in the past with Emma Travis, super successful, really deep workshop. Definitely take a look at this one as well to really get a lot of different ways of how you can go about kind of eliciting some of that additional feedback. Also really, really important that people mess this up a lot is writing and designing for skimming. Like, I think a lot of us understand this, but in execution, we kind of don't do it, right? But realistically, people are looking for clues as they go through your page. None of us, myself included, and you, everybody here, nobody actually linked to the ICP research. Yeah, somebody can maybe throw that in chat. Okay, yeah, somebody did. Realistically, everybody's just skimming looking for clues. Nobody's going to read every single word on our page. I don't do it, and you don't do it, and none of us will. So you need to really support that as much as possible. You might have seen some sort of an example like this before. I really love it for how well it works, right? You're going to read this headline first, you'll read this second, and maybe you kind of get lazily about, and maybe you read some of this, but you're probably not going to. Most of the time when we go through a website, this is where we're going to bury a lot of value and that people actually never get to at all, right? So we really need to pay attention to what messages people are going to actually consume. So the way I like to think about it is if you just assume that visitors are only going to read this and maybe this, make sure you're not wasting these opportunities. Make sure that you're putting valuable information here instead of just placeholder things or things that are just like descriptors or something like that, right? Don't presume that people are going to read this the way that we typically always put this together, and you're going to miss so much value that's just buried. They never get it, right? Also, we can actually write and design better if we understand this. You can actually build your pages and your messaging around how people are actually going to behave, right? You write shorter sentences. Like this, also, if you go in a Hemingway app, you'll see this actually easily. Take a big chunk that you have on your website, throw it in the Hemingway app that we linked up earlier. Go in and add some paragraphs, or I mean some sentence breaks where maybe you naturally wouldn't, like if you were more formally writing something, you wouldn't, but where it kind of logically might, like, okay, I could end a sentence there. You'd be amazed how just doing that will instantly start bringing the reading grade level down. Shorter sentences are easier to consume. Less verbose language is also easier to consume. Remove jargon, remove useless fluff in general, use bullet points, things like that, right? We can do so much to help support the delivery of our message. Remember earlier I said, the design and the messaging go hand in hand, right? So how the design is able to deliver the message, super important, but you also have to write for that understanding as well. Don't waste sub-headline opportunities. I see this all of the time in Wynter tests, and it never performs well. This is great for like when people are going through their considerations saying, okay, well, we need to find a solution that does time tracking and it does billing and invoicing, and it also has the analytics. Okay, great. So I'm going through and finding all these places and check. They have this. So great, I checked the boxes. I know that you offer these components that I need, but you've created zero value. And as we just talked about, in here is where you're trying to elicit the value, right? But I'm not going to read that. Like the likelihood of me reading this is way, way smaller than having read these headlines. So don't waste that opportunity. Write and design for how people are going to behave on your site. An example of a better headline, in my view, this was somebody who had tested through Wynter as well. Creating your campaigns effortlessly, generate content instantly, blah, blah, blah. This at least is not a wasted opportunity. They could have easily just labeled this like smart builder, smart copy, smart traffic. And that would be really a wasted headline opportunity. It doesn't tell me much. It's just kind of labeling your product name, your product feature name, wasted opportunity. This is maybe still a little too cutesy in general, but at least is closer to the right approach overall. This I personally view as works better, right? Create your pages and write your copy and optimize your traffic. Like I have a really strong understanding of what this solution is offering me just by if I only read that alone, right? However, going back to what we just looked at with the hierarchy, take some of those clues again, right? If you just do simple things of bolding some of a key portion of this, right? I'm much more likely at this point now to read, get your 30% lift, right? So now I can understand optimize traffic and with a 30% improvement. Great, right? If I don't read any of this, the things that I've actually still walked away with actually are super valuable at this point. And you haven't left value just buried that I'm not going to interact with, right? So the other thing I mentioned before, differentiation. There's differentiation, I think, is still a challenge and how the best way to handle it, but I think you need to address it in some capacity. What actually makes you different? How are you different than your competitors? You don't have to call out a competitor directly. I mean, you can if you want. More power to you. Probably great to meet some of that head on, but you don't actually have to. They just need to know, like, what is it that you are different. So in this case, for instance, if it is something about how much more data you have or how your data is delivered, the responses, for instance, in this case, could be really, really useful. It might be simple enough as just utilizing, some of the actual improvement statistics. Over and over again in Wynter tests, this has continued. These tests well all of the time. Like, I've actually seen Wynter tests where there's numbers in there that actually make 0 sense, and people still gravitated to it. They talk about it. They're calling it out. They're noticing it, right? So simple technique to actually build in some of these the additional value that you can create for your customer. But make sure you label these numbers appropriately. Don't waste again that opportunity, even if even if they'll notice it otherwise. Make sure that it's actually useful information in here. And a non-messaging tip, as we're kind of getting to the bottom here, non-messaging tip that I've learned so much for Wynter. It's not directly messaging, but again, design and messaging our partners, right? This is a very common thing that we do in marketing SaaS businesses, is we make these sort of illustrations that showcase our product. People want to see your product before they go through a demo, before they go through a trial. Super, super important that you're meeting this head on your homepage. I think what my hypothesis is, what we've kind of done is like showing our product can be kind of boring sometimes, depending on what it looks like if we're just throwing a screenshot of our product. And so we've taken this approach where we'll try and tell these stories through these illustrations. But realistically, people don't understand these because this is a puzzle at this point. I don't know what all of these components mean, and I've got to sit here and start figuring each little piece out and how this ties to this and what does this mean, right? This becomes more work than just reading. And we've already established that people don't want to read your site in the first place. So if this is now even more work than reading, I'm not going to do that. However, if you nail these, if you really can get these right, simplify them, make them like an animated version of this that kind of walks people through, so it shows them the steps very simply without having to hit a play button, it tends to perform very, very well. If you can nail these, it helps create a ton of good value in general. So super extra bonus tip there. So what is the value of getting these things right? So I've got just a couple of quick quotes here from some people who actually are Wynter clients in general. But Quidel Marketing has they did some work for one of their clients, Bamboo Cloud. Being able to test and do into your audience and find what they're actually saying. The thing I tell people about some of these things is like, this is at this point, this is our opinion. This is my opinion based on things I've seen, but I'm not your ICP. I've said this about some of the other slides. Like, I'm not that ICP. So actually getting this feedback from your buyers, super useful to understand how they're actually viewing it and how they're understanding it. But, being able to solve for, this is pretty interesting. Like, they weren't speaking to SMBs in this product. It actually is for SMBs, but the participants all felt like it was enterprise and they were priced out of it, right? We had that illustration earlier, and that there was no clarity on the product. So they took these learnings and they were able to increase conversion rate by 48% on their site by actually, addressing these issues head on. Cognism as well has put out a lot of stuff in general about how the value that they've been able to find by actually focusing on their web pages and the language of their web pages, and being able to increase again their homepage conversion by 40% as well. So there's tremendous value in taking the time to actually understand and speak to your audience and making sure they actually understand exactly or that they actually understand things the way that you hope that they understand them. Change it, improve it, test it, and find out what actually is working for them. So, a little plug obviously for Wynter. If you haven't utilized Wynter, like I said, this is our opinion. This is my opinion. It doesn't really replace actually getting it from your actual ICP within 48 hours. Definitely something to take a look at and get some of these things addressed. All right, that's the end of my slides for today. Hopefully, I don't know if there's some questions here we can go through. Over to Pep.
Fantastic. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. We have a lot of questions here, so let's tackle these, from the top. So I'm going to sort them by popularity. Kendra here is asking, so how do you ensure for simplicity without falling into the trap of vagueness? Right? Simple language, but how do we make sure it's not too vague?
That's a really good point and a good question. I would say I would still tackle that with relevance again, right? That relevance example that we had earlier, you could easily argue there was some vagueness to that, but what if you're the right audience, then there's far less vagueness, right? I would say the examples that I said that focused on clarity, or creativity over clarity, that's super vague. That nobody is going to get anything from that whatsoever, right? So what are the words? What are the identifiers that your audience is going to actually be able to say, hey, yep, that's me? Then you're removing vagueness, but you're able to simplify as much as possible.
Yeah, and I would want to add here that specificity does not mean complex. So it's not a choice between simple and vague. Like it's a false choice. So anything specific can be simple. All right. What if you have several audiences you need to appeal to, several industries and businesses versus technical buyers?
Yeah, that one, especially on your homepage, is why that's, some of this testing is so important in general, right? Because it's easy once you can get people self-segmented into a page like that is about their exact problems, and then you can speak directly to their language. But on the homepage, you're trying to talk to all of those people, right? So you really need to be able to break down what are the commonalities that those people are all kind of facing. It's really can be a trouble if you're trying to speak to specific pains, because the pains might be different. But the more research that you can do there, then to find those overlaps to make sure you're speaking to the right people, super important. I would also challenge to make sure that, sometimes people say they work for a variety of industries, but really 80% of their customers are from one industry. Speak to the 80%,
Exactly right. So I would agree with you. So my approach would be default to your biggest ICP, make that the homepage messaging, and then link out to sub pages. Like if you're this, go here. If you're that, go click on this thing. For instance, with Wynter, we're a two-sided marketplace behind the scenes, connecting SaaS buyers with people who sell software. But on the Wynter homepage, we only talk to the SaaS companies, not the other side of the market. Okay, next one here. Yeah, I guess Joe's question is exactly the same. What do you do with your multiple audiences? Yeah, self-segmentation plus prioritization. How do you stay different when you go simple in your messaging?
How do you stay different when you go simple in your messaging?
Yeah, I think so. Noor here assumes that simple messaging means undifferentiated. It's a false choice again. So simple, anything can be simple, So differentiated messaging can be also simple, right? Jane has a question about the B2B messaging layers framework. So the steps, clarity, relevance, and so on, are these in order? And should you structure the homepage in order, or is it just you sprinkle those things all over?
Primarily, it's in order, right? Like I said, you're going to tackle some of those kind of repeatedly. But yes, clarity, first thing you got to start addressing. That's the handshake. That's your H1 on your page. That's where you're starting to address clarity right away. Like I showcased there, you could do relevance there. Like they're close, they're 1A and 1B, but that is still the order priority. You have to nail the clarity and the relevance first. If you don't nail clarity and relevance, you're not going to create motivation. You're not going to create value. And then differentiation doesn't matter, because if they don't understand what you are, they don't know what to compare you against anyway. So differentiation doesn't do anything.
Exactly right. Yeah. They don't care unless they get it. So clarity is most important, followed by, is this for me? So that's the relevance piece. And then you tease the promised land with, the value proposition. Like, what do you get when you sign up? You need to want it. And only then it's like, well, how is this different from this other thing? So it's definitely in order. Sander is asking, what's the best approach to creating a hero message that targets your main audience but doesn't deter other audiences? So if we have, again, multiple audiences, how do we not alienate the other people?
Well, again, it goes to the earlier question a little bit there, right? Is that really necessary that you have to speak to everybody? Speak to the core customer as much as possible. because that's still where your business is going to come from, right? If you actually have like a 50-50 split, then you're just going to have to figure out a blend. But I wouldn't worry about it. I get people ask me sometimes about like messaging, like, well, how do I balance my messaging with the fact that I have all these SEO concerns, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. And I get it, right? Like, you don't want to necessarily, SEO is clearly important, but if you get them there and you can't speak to them anyway, then what was the value of trying to actually get them there, right? So it's really the same thing with that. Like, if you're trying to get a bunch of audience there, speak to the people you're actually trying to get there and who are going to drive your business versus trying to make a catch-all that works for everybody.
And in terms of business strategy, I mean, it feels like you would make more money if you appeal to more people, but really, for a startup under $10 million business, really focusing in on a single ICP actually makes your business grow faster. It's paradoxical. So like with Wynter, we serve all kinds of companies. We could sell to agencies, we could sell to B2B e-commerce, but we chose to focus on B2B SaaS. So really, I think the first 10 million of your revenue should come from a single ICP, and then you expand out later. How long is too long for a homepage?
Well, long is definitely long. I actually wish I had a better metric in terms of like maybe average number of words or something like that. I don't necessarily. I will say that what I'll tend to find over and over again is a lot of exhaustion with people by the time they get to our typical SaaS page, right? Not frequently, again, in Wynter results, you'll see people be like, "Oh, this has been so much to read," and or I've read this type of thing 3 times already, right? So we tend to be really repetitive in what we're saying and just continually cram too much information in there. So again, I'd go back to the ruthlessly edit. Take out things that actually don't need to be there. Nobody's going to flag you for the fact that like, oh, it was too simple. Oh, they can. You're going to motivate them to explore the rest of your product anyway. Nobody's going to sign up for your demo from just reading your homepage, regardless, right? They're going to still look at other pages of your site. So make sure that they understand that there's value there to continue to do that and consider you.
Yeah, I would think where I would start is like your messaging strategies. Like, what are the 3 things we want the target audience to know about us? And this comes from buyer research, knowing their top pains, desired gains, things like that. And you really, your homepage shouldn't be more than 3 messages. And so 3 content blocks and maybe some social proof. If you go to qualified.com, that's an example of a way fucking too long homepage. Because what happens with too long homepages is that your messaging gets diluted. Nobody reads everything. They just scroll. And then if there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're not sure what to focus on, and so your messaging gets diluted, it's less effective. So I would say above the fold, and then maybe 2-3 content blocks is like a good benchmark. Obviously, there are exceptions as well. Okay, let's see. Next question. Okay, so B2B e-commerce. Should we lead with special offer, or can we lead with clarity relevance messaging? So should we lead with an offer, special offer, or lead, this is what we do? Any thoughts?
A little less probably exposure there at the moment, but I would say that recently I have had some people come through like our messaging makeover that kind of fit that a little bit more. And in their case, the one I'm thinking about right now was like a packaging solution for B2B general. And they were really clear about the value that they offered, about why you would choose them versus an offer. And they did it really, really well. There's some question about whether those are the things that people would have cared about. But I think that was the right, in that case, was still the right approach at that component. I guess it's going to depend on what you're really selling for B2B e-commerce overall. I don't know. Pepe, you might have some different experience there.
Yeah, we have so many questions. Let's keep going here. How much should you describe your product on your homepage versus leave that to your product page? I guess this question depends on like if you're a single product or you're a multi-product product, right? Because if you're a single product, it's one and the same. Right? Anything else you want to add here?
Well, and I think that's again very common. Like the approach right now is to still list out a bunch of stuff on the homepage, and that's again where it goes to like it gets too much. Make sure you're highlighting the things that are really the most important, And again, I've seen through testing sometimes people like it might be the fourth thing that people listen that's where all the value is. So do some research to make sure you understand what are the things that are actually going to drive that value. List those. It doesn't have you don't have to describe everything. You've got product pages like the question states, right? But what are the things that are going to drive the most value that people will actually want to go and explore that, right? But don't exhaust them.
Next one here. Oops, I changed the order of my. But there was a question about when you start writing copy for the homepage. Yeah, Rumley is asking, are you starting in Google Docs and then fitting that into the design, or do you write the copy with design in mind?
I still would start with Docs for sure. Once by the time that's not how I would have done it. I would have designed the site first, and that's really the wrong approach. But that's why I really kind of stress, though, that the two go hand in hand. But because I think you still start with the language because it's the thing that's going to do the selling. And the design has to see what the language is to realize how to put the page together and support it. But you can write with that understanding of how people are actually going to experience your page as well. But definitely start with the writing.
Exactly. So you start with what is it that I want to tell to my target customer? And the role of design is only to help communicate the message. Nothing else. That's the primary thing. Help communicate the message. So absolutely, I'm with you, Dustin. Starting the docs. Next one here. You mentioned messaging strategy. Can you elaborate a bit more on what you think is essential to bring out messaging-wise for a B2B SaaS homepage?
Well, I still think, like I've repeated, like being able to attach to the relevant side, really, because it's going to create the value. So do you understand? Are you solving their pains, right? Are you speaking the same language that they're speaking, using the same terms that they are, and aligning yourself to really the goals that they're after? Because everybody's going to come to you trying to replace something. It's the kind of jobs to be done approach, right? There's something that they're replacing in their life. They're trying to make a better life for themselves. Nobody inherently wants to make a product switch, right? But they need to for some other reason. So if you can attach yourself to that and say, yep, I've got you, I understand you, I can solve this, that's where your strategy is.
Any opinion on including a explainer video in your in the hero area, in the above the fold area?
Yeah, don't do it. The hero section, definitely not. I have seen in testing further down the page, once people, again, they understand the clarity and relevance, they'll actually started to naturally say, okay, oh, I wish there was a video around here. I'd like to see that. But in like the hero section, I've never seen that perform where somebody would actually want to watch it. And then in Wynter test, they'll frequently flag out like, I'm never going to click that video. I'm never going to watch it.
Yeah, and also if you have analytics, if you have a video and you look at your analytics, what's the percentage of visitors that actually hit play on the video? I'm not even talking about watching it all the way through, but just hit play. It's around 10%. So if you rely on the video to communicate something, 90% are not going to get it. So video is supplemental to the text, not a replacement for it. All right, Mark is asking.
It goes back to that mentality of like burying things within text, right? You're burying value there that somebody's never going to get. Don't bury it behind a click. Don't bury it behind a video, right?
Yep. Mark is asking, does social proof work in the first 50% of the page to overcome objections?
This I'd actually like to see more testing on, frankly. I've seen mixed results, like with like a typical logo bar and stuff like that we all do within Wynter results. People still definitely notice them. I mean, as we would probably understand, like if it's a company that I recognize, all the better. Although sometimes, again, kind of like the enterprise example, sometimes people will see them and be like, oh, geez, these are the companies that use that. That's not me. I can't use those either. So, but at the same time, I've seen people notice if they're not there, right? So it's weird because from my experience so far at Wynter, it's a bit of a banner blindness. It's a thing that we sort of don't pay a lot of attention to, but at the same time, it has a small amount of value. And I don't see enough people really bringing like social proof in terms of like the stories up top or something. However, we did a case study with AppQs. If anybody hasn't seen it, we could throw the link in chat there. They had a super, super smart idea to really bring some of that to the logo bar, where they brought like those kind of metrics about the improvement right up in that same logo bar, which I thought was genius, and it tested really well as well in Wynter.
Somebody asked, well, what if the video is autoplay?
I mean, even worse, nobody wants that, right? The only thing that I've seen recently the only thing I've seen recently that worked okay-ish, I thought there was at least somebody did a good job of curating the thumbnail on the video, so that even if I didn't click the video, I got value from the thumbnail. Because the other part of it where we typically go wrong is that we just have a thumbnail that doesn't do anything for us either, right? So if you are still going to do a video, really pay attention to what the thumbnail is.
Jake is saying, earlier Dustin showed the business owner on the homepage and mentioned conversion rate increases. Have you seen this work for SaaS as well? Real product screenshots plus real headshots of the founders.
Well, in that case, Bob was the product, so it's a little bit different, right? So it's still the same thing as actually showcasing the product, but Bob was the product in general.
Yeah, so I would say in SaaS, nobody cares about the people, even if they're famous. They want to see what is it, how does it work. So real screenshots for the win in most cases. All right, Lars is saying messaging, value proposition versus what it is we offer. How do you sequence that in your headline? Like lead with the value proposition, then explain what it is in sub paragraph. So it's really structuring your, I guess, above the fold thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a balance there because most of the examples that I showed today, like I kind of would often took the sub headline out of there, but you're going to do the two pieces together, right? And so the sub headline is typically where we get too verbose and we start putting too much in there and making it too complicated right off the bat. But realistically, both of those lines work in conjunction together to really address the clarity and the relevance. So both of them are super, super important, but just don't fill them up with junk.
And I want to say that it really depends on the category that you're in. So if it's a mature, heavily crowded category, let's say you're in marketing automation, you're in CRM, you have 500 competitors, you absolutely want to lead with differentiated value. Whereas if you're in an emerging category, you're doing category creation, kind of like Wynter is doing. So if you go on our homepage, you see that we sell the category. Do message testing is the signal, because I mean also we are like the only game in town. So we focus on what can you do with it, what is it, rather than a differentiated value. So it depends. All right, Shannon is asking, how can you avoid having your messaging sound like hype?
Well, again, speaking in the same tone of your customers, right, and avoiding that too much of the creativity angle. I have seen a couple of things recently that like were pretty creative, but actually were super clear at the same time, and that ended up testing really well because it was super clear. So it didn't become hype at that point. But typically the hype part comes from us trying to be way too creative with it and just not speaking in the same tone as your ICP.
Yeah, and I also want to say, it's like, if you don't want to sound hypey, don't write hypey stuff. You know, a neutral tone, no exclamation marks, no, don't put emotion in the words of the customers. Like, they're astonishingly simple. You can't say shit like that. People need to conclude on their own. Wow, this is astonishingly simple. I know nobody says that, but so like all that kind of stuff, just keep it to yourself. Okay, let's see. Next one. What do you do when you want to stuff too many benefits into the homepage?
Well, again, go back to figuring out which ones are the ones that are going to actually move the needle for your audience, right? You're going to just exhaust people anyway. The whole game about it is the mental availability that people actually have, right? That's why we don't read everything in the first place. It's just too much mental work that we don't really want to do. So if you're going to just throw too many benefits at me, I'm just going to start tuning you out. It's like sending me too many emails, right? So really nail what ones are the most important and get those across.
Also sent a quick call to action here. If you want to see how you can use Wynter for your B2B SaaS companies, you can schedule a demo right here. Okay, next question. Any guidelines on the number of words on the homepage? I guess we talked about homepage length. Yeah. It's not about the number of words. You want to keep it as brief as possible and not focus on the three key things you want to communicate. Let's see. Can you comment on the importance of leading kerning in emails and or landing pages?
leading
or any
learning.
best practices for readability?
So just like the typography in general. I mean, not from like necessarily from the research standpoint, but just from like my, like a design perspective. Obviously, you're going to want to make things as easy to read as possible. Don't make them too small. Give plenty of space. I mean, those are it's kind of a different box there.
Yeah. Simple words, short sentences. Talking about short sentences, Joe is saying bullet points versus short sentences. When do you use what?
I think if you can do short sentences and short paragraphs, I think it tends to work a little bit better. Bullet points are good for getting I would say like specific details across easily, right? But bullet points don't work so great if you're trying to still just cram too much information into them. So again, just like the quick hit nuggets of like things that people are going to easily be able to walk away from. They'll pay attention to bullet points, but you got to make sure that they're things that I can easily remember. But if you're still sort of trying to describe some value to me, short sentences, short paragraphs are going to be easier to consume.
Yeah, if your sentence wants to say 3 things, we do this and the other thing and the third thing, then bullet points can be the better way to communicate it. But you can't use too many bullets, I feel. Bullets are great for scanning. If you're just quickly scanning, it's just easier to read. But you don't want to overdo it. Bruno is asking, do hero's journey and transformation promises work? Stuff like go from this to that.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything where I say it doesn't work. I think sometimes it's a little bit for the standout portion, right? Especially something that Pep, I think, kind of nails about really kind of standing out. I think that doesn't help you necessarily stand out because it's something that a lot of people end up kind of saying. But if you really can deliver on that, there's nothing wrong with it from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. I think everything can work. So it's really about the execution. Okay, so have we missed any questions here? Scrolling through all the questions here. I think we got this stuff. Multiple questions about A/B testing. And what I would say that A/B testing your messaging, fantastic. If you have the transaction volume to do it, where I say minimum 500 signups over a time period, usually 4 weeks. If you don't have that, you can't run A/B testing. That's as simple as it is. And A/B testing will only tell you if B is better than A and by how much. Message testing is not A/B testing. Message testing is a form of qualitative research. There are no requirements to your traffic, signups, anything, right? So sometimes people think that message testing equals A/B testing. These are not the same things. Okay. Anybody else want to have a sneak in a quick last question before we wrap this up? Anything I missed? Last chance to type some stuff. No. All right. Well, this was great, guys. Give it up for Dustin. Woo! Awesome work. We'll send the recording out. We'll put it on our YouTube channel. There are recordings of a previous workshop on our YouTube channel. Yeah, stay tuned. More stuff coming out from Wynter all the time. Follow Dustin on LinkedIn, and we'll see you on the other side. Peace.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Pat.